Hey guys, RCT3 Crashes 100 here, and I am here with not the second part to my Around the World in Banknotes little mini-series, multi-part video, because that hasn't arrived yet as of today, but the parcel I mentioned ordering in the last video has arrived before it. So we're going to be taking a look at some Zimbabwean dollars and some Venezuelan Bolivar Fuerte, as opposed to the Bolivar Soberano from the last video. So that's pretty much the best intro I can give. Let's begin. We're going to be going through two currencies which are beset with hyperinflation. So let's go. So I've already removed all the packing slips and stuff here so we can take a look at how this came. I ordered these from a company called Just World Banknotes, which I will put in the description below to where you can go to their website, which is very cool. It has been secured in place with a post-it note here, which is, I guess, useful. So let's get this out. There we go. Just try and get the tape off the end. There we go. Excellent. So we have a packet of mixed notes. Let's take a look and go through these. So, as you all know, I have featured Zimbabwean dollars before on this channel. I would go and grab the one I have right now, but you'll soon see that that wasn't really the most necessary. So, cast your eyes back to 2007. Zimbabwe is undergoing a period of land reforms where basically white landowners were being evicted and replaced with black people to run the farms. Now, this was, in theory, quite a good idea. It was returning the land to the people. But the problem was the government selected people who didn't really know how to tend to the land, and so production of goods fell. Now, rather than hiring people that could handle it, maybe doing a survey, seeing who could actually help, or even bring in sort of workers to the farms to help the people who maybe had a harder time, the government thought it would be easier to just print more money. So let's go into detail on this banknote before we continue. So as you can see here, we have the Chiremba balancing rocks in Epworth, which is the same as the one before. This one has quite a nice serial number, I'll admit. Harare 2007, Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. I promised to pay the bearer on demand $1 for the Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. And again, at this time, the governor was Dr. G. Gono. Very nice. If I bring it up really closely, you can actually see there's some micro printing. If you notice very carefully around this rectangle, you can actually see it's micro-printed with 1. And I believe this is the same for most of the other denominations. So let's go to the reverse. As you can see here, we have Victoria Falls on the left and a Cape buffalo on the right, which is quite a prominent piece of wildlife in Zimbabwe. And again, if I zoom in here, you can see we do have micro-printed ones around this side as well. It's generally quite nice. A note, really. It's pretty much everything you'd want from a banknote. I suppose the only really unusual thing about it is at this time, inflation was continuing to go up as a result of those land reforms that I mentioned and how disastrously they were handled. And the sad thing is, at this point, this dollar was already quickly becoming absolutely useless. It was costing more money to print these than you could actually make in profit from circulating them, essentially. So, there you go. And let's fast forward a year into... If I can actually, hang on, get it out. There we go, I'm trying to get it out of the packet. Let's fast forward a year into 2008, and the situation has worsened greatly. This is a $10 trillion note. I would get the 100 trillion, but they're quite expensive. And generally, I just wanted to go for something a bit lower, but just imagine I had 10 of these and you would have a $100 trillion note. So again, it's very much the same. It does have a visible security strip on the outside here with RBZ, Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe. The obverse is more or less the same. Just your Chiremba balancing rocks again in Epworth. And here on the back we have the Reserve Bank's building, which is the tallest building in Harare, I believe. And we then have a traditional ruin. There is micro-printing around here, I think, on this side, actually. Yeah, there is. So let's go and zoom in on that. Come on. You know you want to. There we go. Gonna hold this to stop shaking it. You can see we have 10 trillion micro-printed around the edge. Let's go back. We'll zoom in again. There we go. And so as a result, the currency was collapsing. Something had to be done, and so eventually the economy became dollarized, and reserve currencies such as the US dollar, the South African rand, the Japanese yen, and the pound sterling were allowed to be used in transactions. And so these notes were demonetized and replaced with a fourth Zimbabwean dollar in 2009, but that didn't really circulate very well, and eventually in 2015 it was finally booted and replaced exclusively with reserve currencies. So let's fast forward to 2019. The country has been relying on reserve currency for quite some time when all of a sudden bond notes are brought in. This is a 2 Zimbabwean dollar bond note, and as you can see it's got quite a bit of a different design, but again we have the Chiremba balancing rocks. The design is very modern. It's still paper, I think, but it does feel like it's been treated with plastic. Harare 2019. And so basically what had happened, after almost 5 years of reserve currencies being used exclusively, the government decided that they needed to bring in a new currency. And this is what is often nicknamed a Zim dollar or a Zola, and its formal name is actually an RTGS dollar. The goal with these would be that they would replace circulating reserve currencies and try and bring it back into control. But the people didn't really take to that one very well. They assumed it would be sort of the first step to reintroducing a very unreliable Zimbabwean dollar in the same manner as the third and fourth. And so people are still using reserve currencies. They're also using things like fuel coupons or agro coupons, which are even being paid to people in lieu of money, which is quite interesting. I don't have one of those because they're quite hard to come by, but that might be an interesting thing to focus on the channel. So there we go. If I knew what this building was, I would tell you, but I don't right now. So let's put that over there. And so now we are going to go to Venezuela. Now, if you want to actually know just how bad inflation was, though, in Zimbabwe, just quickly before we move on, the inflation rate in Zimbabwe in 2009, which is when they finally got rid of the Zimbabwe dollar, was 79.6 billion%. For context, the UK gets concerned, let's bring in a £5 note here that's just out of my wallet. The UK gets concerned when inflation goes above 2%. Our inflation tends to hover around between 1.5% and 2%. Any higher than that, we get concerned. You can really see how Zimbabwe had it terribly. So, let's move on to Venezuela. Now, inflation happened here, and it did go into hyperinflation, but the results weren't quite as extreme by Zimbabwe standards, but still really not great. So let's move over to Venezuela. I cannot obviously put this in frame because it is vertical without holding it sideways, but let's begin. So this was made in 2007, Dos Bolivares, and the Venezuelan Bolivar at this time was referred to as the Bolivar Fuerte, also known as quite literally the Strong Bolivar. Interestingly about this one here, if I move my thumb, you can see there is an up arrow, which suggests that these actually would have to be loaded into vending machines or maybe cash points in a certain way. So on the reverse here, we have 2 Amazon River dolphins, or El Boto, as they are sometimes referred to in Spanish. And again, Dos Bolivares. And so there you go. This is obviously 10 years before the inflation crisis actually set in. Fast forward 10 years, and all of a sudden, these notes begin to appear. This is not 100 bolivares. As you can see here, this is 100,000 bolivares, literally 100,000. The only reason why it's written as 100 here is just to shorten the amount of space it has on the page. So the 2 birds on the back here are red siskins. They are related to our goldfinch. They are in the same family, and they are basically a tropical species of finch, to sum that up. And so hyperinflation in in Venezuela hit a maximum of about 10 million%. So that's not quite as high. Not quite as high is a bit of an understatement, but it's not as high as it was in Zimbabwe, and that was around 2017, 2018. At the same time, though, and this is a crisis which is still going on, even redenomination couldn't solve it. In 2018, the Bolivar Soberano was brought in to replace the Bolivar Fuertes. Here we have 500 Bolivar Soberano. On the reverse, we have the Venezuelan troupial, which is the national bird. Very colourful here, and this note doesn't really quite represent it. In real life, these lighter patches on it are actually bright orange. It's really quite a stunning bird when you sort of see photographs of it, which is quite cool. Forgot to mention it as well, but obviously you have the national coat of arms here as well, and we have the denomination on the right. Quinientos Bolivares, I think I pronounced that right. So, there we go. As you can see here, redenominating it didn't actually solve the problem. Inflation is lowered, but it's still very much present. I don't have a more up-to-date value, but in 2019, May 2019, the inflation rate was somewhere around 2,200%, which is not good. Not good by any standards, considering that is still a good sort of 1,000 times higher than the inflation rate that makes us worried. So there you go. I figured let's put the 10 trillion note in frame here. Oh, we've got one last thing. So I mentioned in the last video that I had ordered another Ingultrum from Bhutan, and here we go. This is a 1986 one Ingultrum. The design hasn't really changed that much. I guess it now has a border around the outside, whereas it didn't have that in sort of the new design that I showed off. So there you go. Again, we have Druk on both sides, and we have the national emblem in the middle. So there we go. Let's end the video by bringing back the 10 trillion note to focus on. And here we go. This has been a separate video about two currencies that suffered hyperinflation and are still suffering from it today. With that being said, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm RCT3 Crashes 100, and I'll see you in the next part of the Around the World in Banknotes series. Over and out.